I'm starting one more live today, and this evening I'm delighted to invite a violinist from London Symphony Orchestra, Maxine Kwok, who would join us from London. So I'm waiting for her to join me here. Maxine?
Ah, it's
Yes,
worked.
great. Yes, be free to move as you wish.
Yeah, I just needed to get it in the right place so that my background is decent. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's important. Do you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you very
Mm-hmm.
well. Thank you.
I will switch off the comments so that your face is better seen.
Okay. Oh, I can have my nice flowers in the back.
So,
Okay.
well, maybe a few first questions about your activities now. Was there a way to overcome the initial anxiety and to work out a structured routine for today?
Well, it's been over 2 months now since
Mm-hmm.
we stopped working. Yeah, really, probably 2 months and a week or so. And it all came as I guess a bit of a shock. So everyone just sort of we saw what was happening in the world, but I don't know. You just kind of thought, well, it's all going to be fine. And then suddenly, when we were no longer working, it was just going from full-on concerts, rehearsals to just stay home. It was difficult, but to be honest, I had a sort of injury just as we were kind of locked down. I had a kind of trapped sciatic nerve, so I was very much focused on this and not so
Mm-hmm.
much on the actual situation, which in a way, well, now that I look back, was quite good because I wasn't thinking too much about the actual, this whole sort of problem for orchestras and people. I was sort of focused on I need to be able to walk and be able to try and sleep without great pain. But once that was over, after about 10 days, yes, I had to get myself into some kind of routine and a schedule. And I think that really worked for me. That's a kind of I would find it very easy to sloth about and not be very productive with my time. So I
Mm-hmm.
think for me it was really important to make sure I set myself some kind of schedule for the day and make sure that I kind of stick to it. So I had some form of structure, a bit like going to work, but it wasn't that easy, I have to say.
How do you motivate yourself? For example, if you now don't have any concerts, say before September, it's probably difficult to play on everyday basis.
Yeah, that is definitely, and I've talked to friends about this because some people said, "Oh, I have no interest in picking up my instrument because it seems so far off that we're going to play." For me, it was more that I didn't want to get to the point when we restarted playing that I would feel so out of touch with
Mhm.
what I was doing because, of course, it's still motor skill. It requires a lot of discipline and dedication. And obviously, it's not something that you just lose. But I hate that feeling when you've been on holiday and you come back and you feel like you're jellies or a bunch of bananas. So I very much thought I gave myself 2 weeks off because I felt a bit sad about the situation, a bit kind of. But then I thought, okay, I'm just gonna play every morning, Monday to Friday. So I keep my weekend kind of free. Also because I live in an apartment, so I'm aware that my neighbour is going to be around at the weekend. At least during the week, they're also focused on their work. So
Mhm.
I think, well, if I play, they won't. And they've always said they don't really hear it and they don't mind. So that's nice. But I just gave myself sort of goals. I found out that I had quite a lot of sheet music here. Obviously, there's also lots of music you can download on the internet. And I kind of just revisited things for fun.
Mhm.
And I quite enjoyed just doing that. and having the time to really spend on focusing yourself, which to be honest doesn't happen. I think with any sort of bad situation, you have to end up finding the positive. And if this means I can at least improve my violin playing because I'm hearing myself properly every day and not just in the orchestra, which does kind of, not saying it ruins your playing by any means, but sometimes it's very hard and you lose a bit of focus. So I sort of see it as a challenge to make myself a better player for now, and just to sort of work on things that I haven't really had time to, and just try and sort of enjoy it. It is hard when you don't have an actual date of knowing when you'll work again, or you don't have a concert to sort of put on. But I think musicians have an element of discipline from very early on, which kind of fuels you to work hard anyway, even if it's for not, I don't know if you want to term playing for an audience as a reward, but I think we're very much used to spending the time alone, just working on things ourselves. So I did have to kind of come to terms with that and try, you know, and enjoy playing, but mostly it's because I don't want to get out of shape and for it to feel like a mountain to climb to come back. That's not a nice feeling.
Yeah. And I also felt that, you know, at these times we kind of go to the core of our desires and wishes. And my question is, what was the music that was appealing to you, like really soothing your heart during these times? Because you said that you had time to revisit things you didn't look at before, and maybe those were those things that your heart saved for hard times in a way.
Yeah, it's funny because I found sort of quite a lot of music which obviously I hadn't touched since I was a student, so really old pieces that were difficult. You know, Bartok solo sonatas, lots of, you know, all these I thought, oh, I've got all this music here with me. But oft some days I just played what I wanted to, and if that meant, you know, slow movement of Tchaikovsky concerto just because it's something that I didn't need to look at the music to play, or I just felt like playing some sort of slow, lovely tunes just to kind of make myself feel a bit better and not be, because it's very easy, you know, I would be practicing something difficult and I think, oh, what's the point? You know, no one's ever going to hear me play this. But it's just having to make yourself do it for the kind of challenge. And I would say to myself, okay, if I can get this really good, then maybe I'll play it down to my family, you know, my parents on Zoom or something at some point. There's just a way that you have to motivate yourself. But I very much don't push myself, because I want to come to the violin with enjoyment. I really want it not to feel like a chore, like, oh my God, it's now 10 a.m. It's my violin time. I always do it. I always practice in the morning. I wanted it to be like, oh, nice. I'm going to play my violin and I'll feel happy about it and things. So it isn't the same for everyone, obviously, but for me, that really helped. And yes, if it means some days I'm just playing a few slow kind of little encore pieces, then I just think that's fine. I've played and I'm keeping myself in shape. My neighbours probably prefer that, to be honest, than me smashing through sort of like or something in Izai and going like, oh God, I could do this 20 years ago, not now. But I think for me, it's important to retain, that is the structure of my day, some kind of violin playing.
Oh, well, as we all do now, we sort of have the memories of our past coming back to us, because in a kind of a void that has been created, it's good to remember what we have done in our lives. And I guess we'll spend the next 50 minutes reminiscing about your previous career, which is not to say there is no future, but at the moment we are in a certain time warp. So now we'll talk about the past. And I guess, you know, I'm interested. I'm from Russia, and we have the system of state education in music, so people, children can actually go to state-funded musical schools. But I know that in Britain it's different. Could you describe how you trained as a kid?
I come from a town in Bromley,
Hmm.
called Bromley, which is sort of part of London. It's just out, it's a
Hmm.
sort of like a suburban top part of London. I just went to a normal school, to be honest, and but I was very lucky because Bromley has a massive hub for music. So as I was growing up, this provided me with massive amounts of opportunities. I was going to this music centre 3, 4 times a week. So I was very lucky because I was at a small school with very, very limited kind of music education going on. It did mean I was very close to my school. It was like 2 minutes, so I could just keep going home and practice and things like that. But I was very, yeah, so, living in Bromley really served me very well until I went to study at the Royal Academy of Music in London.
Hmm.
So that was when I kind of shifted into London life.
Hmm.
And I did an undergrad there, and that's actually when we have something called the String Experience Scheme in the LSO, where we audition string players across all the sort of London colleges, Academy, the college, etc., and they get an opportunity to play. The structures remained pretty much the same over it's more than 20 years since I did that. But the idea is that students get a chance to work in a professional orchestra and see what it's
Hmm.
like, because most of your experiences probably until that moment are very much youth orchestra based, in which case you spend a lot of time on one program, sort of maybe even a whole term you spend for the Christmas concert, or an intensive 2 weeks with these sort of national orchestras and things.
Hmm.
So this kind of gives students a dose of reality that, if the concert's on Wednesday, you start rehearsing on the Monday. So this was great. I absolutely loved it. I loved the orchestra. Already had grown up with the orchestra in my head and wanting to be a part of it. So that was an incredible opportunity for me, because obviously getting to play at at 20 or so, however old I was, proper concerts with, I remember one of them was with Bernard Haitink, and it's kind of amazing to just do things like that, and it gives you some kind of skills, and it just makes you realize how much quicker the whole sort of process goes. So that was kind of my journey, if you like, as a kid.
Am I right in understanding that it was Gergiev who was the head of LSO at that time?
No, I was,
No?
Sir Colin Davis was the
Ah.
conductor at that time. So this is going back 20
Hmm.
years. So he was principal conductor for a few more years when I first joined.
Hmm.
So yeah, a very different characters. Very fun.
Actually, before we immerse ourselves into your LSO life, I wanted to ask, how does this decision form to be a violinist? What kind of context for the decision did you have as a teenager? Did somebody influence you? Did you have other options? Were you so passionate about music that there was nothing else? How did it happen?
Well, my mum studied at the Royal Academy. She studied piano, so she's a piano
Hmm.
teacher. And both my parents love music. They were very keen for me to learn the violin. And I don't think I was very keen at the time. I was I was all intensely like watching a lot of black and white movies, Fred Astaire, this stuff. And I was like, I want to be a tap dancer. This is going to be great. They took me to watch a class, and I was like, oh, amazing. And the sound of the shoes. And then I just remember being in a violin class and thinking, this isn't quite what I expected. And I don't remember, it's funny, isn't it, when you're a kid, how I remember being really interested. At the end of the lessons, the last 5 minutes, you were allowed to pick out a percussion instrument and play them. And I remember being much more interested in this sort of last 5 minutes and thinking, oh, you know, you can go for the tambourine today and stuff. But obviously I must have showed some kind of talent, if you like, for it. And I don't know, it kind of went from there, and I don't recall much about how I felt, but what I do recall is very much loving playing in an orchestra as soon as that has started to happen, which would have been quite early on. And yeah, so it wasn't even, I think it just, I've never really thought about doing anything else. That's always been a very much my focus, and always to have been in an orchestra. So I'm very lucky that I wasn't torn in any different directions. Perhaps I wasn't very good at anything else, but I certainly didn't dedicate my time to anything else, certainly at school, remotely like I did to learning the violin. And I didn't have any idea of saying to myself, well, I would like to be a soloist or something, or I just loved this whole idea of being in an orchestra, because probably sort of socially more than anything else, I just liked this idea of making music with other people. So yeah, it wasn't like, you know, I've, you know, a lot of colleagues who are very, you know, studied something else at university or have great talents in other fields or studied medicine or something. But for me, it was always like, well, I think, you know, if I can make a career being in an orchestra, that's kind of what I want to do.
I can't hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, just saying that I would, you know,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
long as I wanted to be in an orchestra, that was kind of, that was what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Can I ask, in your Royal Academy times for violin, are there certain barriers, sort of, you know, milestones that you work towards and then you overcome them and kind of go to a different level? Is there a certain, I don't know, sort of way, a path in becoming a true professional, that you actually know that today I am on a new, say, round of violin playing, like I'm a better one, and then you kind of go to the next one? Or is it more, say, without those benchmarks, but sort of a progression that you can't really be conscious of?
It's a difficult question to answer, and it may be a very different kind of experience to when I was a student there, say in the late 90s. So this is going back quite a long time. There wasn't so much, for example, there wasn't so, it was more sort of lesson orientated and doing things like that, perhaps preparing people to be a soloist. There was nothing like the kind of interest now there is to get, say, for example, professional orchestral musicians in to give classes and excerpt lessons and this kind of thing. You were very much judged on, you know, your term exam or something. And, you know, if you just kind of didn't perform well in those sorts of things, perhaps certain opportunities wouldn't really happen for you. Obviously, there was also the whole side of, you know, you're taking a degree, so you have to do a whole load of, you know, written learning all about, you know, keyboard harmonies and history of music, which, you know, whether one is interested or not, it has to sort of partake. But certainly, I think there's been quite a big change since the time I was there. I can't say I loved my experience at college, mostly because I had already started working professionally before I went, which kind of threw me. I was not, I was very much all for, I maybe don't want to take this step and I want to go straight into the profession. And quite rightly, my parents said, I think you should get a degree. It could come in useful at some point, and you know, and I think it was right, because, you know, who knows what the future holds. You know, if I ever wanted to take an academic position somewhere or focus on teaching or something, but you know, because I basically missed my first at least month, 6 weeks of my time at the academy, I never really felt like I fitted in because I was off on tour with an orchestra. But I think these days, certainly the amount of work, for example, the LSO does with the Guildhall School of Music right next door, there seems to be a lot more focus on helping students understand what it is, that it's not that you have failed and you're in an orchestra. It's about, you know, this is a fantastic job and this is how you, because not every teacher might have ever really had an orchestral career or really understand it or be able to prepare their students for it. So it makes me really happy that so many of the colleges now very much have orchestral players going in and teaching this kind of skills that you need, because they are not just about being a person that can play an instrument. There's just so much more involved, and it's not necessarily something you're going to learn in your weekly lesson with, say, your professor, I think.
Well, LSO was definitely the right choice, as the next 2 decades proved. So I guess if you let me, we will try to, I will try to ask what the life of an orchestra is like. And I guess my first question is, you know, there is this perception that every London orchestra has a certain sound that is passed from generation to generation. So how would you describe it for LSO?
Yes, it's funny, isn't it, that people say that there's certain kinds of sounds, and it's very hard because sitting within, I have a very different kind of perception of how things are. But I do know that, yes, for example, the LSO have always attracted very strong personalities, in which case tend to be strong personality in playing as well. So there's this element of great punchiness for me in the sound, and that people will always, it doesn't matter if it's a rehearsal and maybe the conductor says, oh, you know, we don't have to play so much, or, you know, take it easy. People are unable to do this. It's always high octane. It's always over 100%. It's kind of, this is very much for me the spirit of the orchestra, and I guess that is part of the sound. I mean, people say they can tell very much. A lot of clients come. We obviously record commercial music constantly as well, and people say, oh, I was specifically drawn to the sound of the orchestra. And in a way, yes, you know, people go, you know, I've seen a change of, maybe in my 20 years, I guess a third of the orchestra has changed for, you know, in that time, this whole cycle of new people. But I guess there are certain people that are drawn to an orchestra, like I was, and we very much like to take on people that we feel are like us. So, which is why I think the essence of an orchestra will kind of remain the same. I mean, certainly the Vienna Phil, it has an incredible string sound. You know, it's just, I'm in awe of it. And of course, they seek, you know, what they're looking for in new young players is the sound that fits within them. So I think it's true that orchestras very much retain that kind of personality, if you like. But definitely, I find, certainly in my orchestras, yes, you get very big personalities for sure.
and as a person enters the room and maybe changes, I wonder whether LSO changes its personality when on tour, when performing, say, on Barbican or at St. Luke's, and compared in other locations in the world. Do you think that the relationship between the musicians change, and therefore the sound as well?
I think it doesn't matter where we are. People just play the way that they do. And it also doesn't matter about a circumstance. It doesn't matter if it's taken us a terrible 8-hour journey to get to a concert hall, or people are really jet lagged because you only flew in the day before, or you're playing a concert in Germany at 8 p.m. but you got up at 5 that morning because obviously we flew from London. People just have this instinct, this way of being, that it's just, you just do your job to the best that you can. And I think that's the same everywhere. Of course, there's also extra excitement when we're in different places in the world. Very much so if we're visiting a place for the first time, or say it's a famous place and you're like, wow, I've always wanted to play here, or you've only ever seen it on, places. But I think there's never a case of it sounding like routine or just autopilot, or just like, it's just another concert. There's always this element of very, for me, that retains a very special thing, because people are there because they want to perform well for audiences, and whether that's a brand new audience of people who have never seen us, for example, a year ago in South America on tour, or whether it's for people who support us all the time in the Barbican here in London. I think it's very much the same.
Did you have your favorite location that kind of visited you in dreams afterwards? Something that struck you?
In South America or generally?
Yes, just in the world.
I do love playing in Suntory Hall in Tokyo. This is one of my favorite places. I don't know, concert halls very much have a kind of personality, and they can feel friendly or a bit scary, and I've always really liked it there. I love Japan, it also because sometimes it's just a combination of things, that the hotel is right next door, so there's never an element of rushing. You can just take your time. It's just one of those places that always makes me feel very happy to play. It is funny, but yeah, I would say and also acoustically, it's lovely, and audience is always very, very friendly. It was amazing to play at the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires last year, because obviously it's a huge theatre. It just looks so impressive, and everyone will have seen it in photos and things, and to actually be there, it's amazing. But sometimes you play in theatres like that with this incredible sort of look, but the sound obviously in theatres is often very, very dry, which is not always, the most flattering, or you think like, oh gosh, it doesn't feel so nice to play in here. But there's always something amazing about a hall, whether it's the way it looks, or the friendliness of the people, or just that, it just has a completely positive experience for you. Madrid is also another place that I love to play. That feels really, really lovely. And the Elbe was, the first time we went there must be 2 or 3 years ago now. Incredible places that, that I wish we had something like that in London.
Now I will go into a bit of a sort of inside your mind question. Like, what do you actually hear? What are you concentrated on when you are set on your place in the orchestra? You can't observe the whole orchestra work from there, right? So what are your points of vision and of sound perception that you have from your position usually?
Gosh, it's very this is coming from somebody who first violinist, so obviously you're very much aware of your own part, just because often it can be very difficult. The place you're even sitting is not even really much within the orchestra. You're not in the heart of, say, a group of people. You're off to the side, and I've actually, it's something I find quite interesting, just because I've been watching all the live streams the orchestra's put out for the last 2 months, which go out twice a week. So I've been watching them, and often, I'm listening with a very different set of ears when I'm here, and I think, oh, I didn't know that happened at that moment, because often you're so engrossed in your own part, as it were, and just sort of looking at the conductor. We streamed John Adams' Harmonera a few weeks ago, and which is a very, very difficult piece. And I just thought, at some points, gosh, I hope there's no close up on my face, because I'm probably sort of going, just sort of beats and stuff to myself. So it's, I'm probably unfortunately less aware than I should be of often what is happening around me. But I think that comes with just limited rehearsal time. Obviously, you know, having been in the profession for 20 years, most things are not coming around for the first time now. So I'm already aware very much of what happens just because through familiarity if things are coming back for the 5th, 10th, 20th time. But very much as long if I can't see the conductor, that I get a bit worried, and that can happen on tour, not in the Barbican because that's our own space and everybody knows. So, but it is a scary thing if you end up in a concert hall on tour and there's very limited space, and maybe you've got somebody tall in front of you and there just isn't anywhere to go. And yeah, if you can't see, oh, that's quite scary.
And who is your point of reference if conductor is sort of engaged with other sections of an orchestra and not really looking at the strings section?
As long as you can see the leader at that point, then you'll be pretty safe. Which yeah, that's happened to me before, where I've just had to sort of, as long you know you can see that and you know that you're not going to come crashing in. It's just, you know, with some music it's not so difficult because it's obvious, but anything that maybe is a bit contemporary or a bit less known, then of course you don't want to feel like you're, you know, driving blindfolded. It's just kind of having to be aware of someone. So as long as I can see that the leader or conductor or both is preferable.
Sometimes I remember the percussions are quite close to you if they are not, you know, the normal set, but some additional stuff. I don't know, the glass harmonica or whatever. The marimba, I think, was also like near you on some concerts. So I was wondering, how well are you aware of the sound on your left, like of second violins and of the percussion section?
It's not ideal. Obviously, there's a limited amount of space. Some pieces are huge. And I have sat actually on the back desk with a whole load of percussion behind me, and it's not their fault. I don't like wearing earplugs in a concert because I feel sort of slightly detached, but sometimes it's just you have to, because you have to protect your own hearing and stuff. In a positive way, you're getting a lot of rhythmic pulse, just even vibrating through your own body that way. I like it if the seconds are next to us. Often they're opposite, but if the seconds are next to us, you know, so much repertoire has music that's intertwined with them, so it feels more cohesive, more like you're part of a unit. But it's become more and more kind of, I don't know, trendy, popular to have this kind of stereo sound, I guess. And I think there's apparently a lot of historic evidence to back up that this is what would have happened. But I personally find it more difficult because then there's a delay, and you know, you often have like can't hear, or by the time you've heard it, it's like too late. But that's all conductor's preference anyway.
Can you describe the heads of LSO in your time? I guess that Gergiev was in your time, right? Well, I don't want to describe only him, but all the succession. Well, some words.
Well, Sir Colin Davis I loved because he had come to conduct when I was in the National Youth Orchestra. So, and we had done Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique, and he was just so inspiring. Obviously, you know, for young people, I don't know, maybe I was 15 or something, to have somebody, this grandiose, famous conductor, very British, you know, English gent type. So I always had very soft spot for him, especially because when I first came into the orchestra, I remember he came up, I was like sitting there warming up, and he came up to me and he was like, "Hello." And I said, and he went, "I'm Colin." And sort of shook my hand, and I was like, "Oh, how lovely," you know, very sweet. And we did wonderful concerts, lots of, you know, fantastic recordings. For LSO Live was pretty new at that time, so we put in a lot of recording work with him. He was just a very generous, lovely man, So that happened, that was a few years. And then we had Gergiev. So very, very different personality. Not someone that I probably even really spoke to. I have to say he did speak to me one time, because he was always sort of, well, famously, it's not a, you know, it's not a secret, he was often late. So he would rush in, you know, we'd start rehearsing. But I remember thinking, oh gosh, yeah, you know, I wouldn't really know what to say to him if I spoke to him. But he did. We were doing a concert on tour with a fabulous Korean singer, and she walked on stage in this hugely sequined gown, and it was like, wow, wow, wow. And then he walked on behind her, and he stopped next to me, and he looked at me and he went, I think she must be a friend of yours. I thought, oh, okay. He's obviously noticed that I like sparkly, shiny things. It's funny because sometimes you just think conductors just see a sea of people, but I think they really clock what sort of people they are. So I know he liked to talk to some of the guys about football. He was already really into football and things. And the years with him were exciting, but yet also fairly, they could be tricky because we were often not as rehearsed as perhaps people would have liked. So, which made for very exciting seat of your pants concerts, but you know, sometimes you felt that maybe it wasn't as polished as it could be. But I've done some of the best concerts that I remember with him in some of his, you know, his great repertoire, Prokofiev, this kind of thing, Stravinsky, really like heart-stopping, incredible things. But I've also done some rather shabby, for me, kind of concerts. So, but, you know, completely different personalities. And then, of course, yes, with Simon, now that's a completely another very different personality, somebody who will always come and chat to you know, who will know everybody in the orchestra, will probably know something about every single person in the orchestra, and will make the time to be very sort of friendly and things. And yeah, just a very very easy musician, someone who sort of is more about the talking and expressing himself about the music. He speaks so well about what he wants. And again, another very, you know, generous musician. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the concerts we do with him. Obviously it hasn't been as long, but he's definitely I just find him a very warm, caring personality, and he has a sort of the good of the orchestra very much at his heart. So I think I think we were all very happy that, you know, with this sort of collaboration happened. So, you know, it was certainly a fantastic thing to happen for us.
How quickly does the orchestra connect with guest conductors? I've seen you, well, with many, with Snyder, with Nazed, with Michael Tilson Thomas. How well do you know them, the ones who come sort of frequently, relatively frequently, and how well you connect with them?
Some of them have a massively long history with the orchestra. Michael Tilson Thomas was a principal conductor, so obviously he knows, you know, it was before my time, but he knows everybody's name. He will always come up and chat to you. You know, if he doesn't know your name, he'll say, hi friend, my name is like you. And he is very, you know, he will throw the orchestra a little dinner party and things like that after a tour. Such a nice person, and very funny. His stories are great. So those are, you know, we have, they come in as guests. Obviously, Nozeda and Francois Xavier are our principal guest conductors. So we see them fairly often. And, you know, everyone has a great relationship with them because we do see them and we travel with them, and of course, and then there's other people who perhaps it's their first time coming in, which is always fascinating. It's always so interesting when you get somebody in for the first time. you kind of learn a bit about them, or people say, you know, you hear something from another orchestra, and people say, oh, they're like this, and you think, and they go, no, they weren't like that at all with us. And we do actually have, which I like, a real variety of people that come in, which I think is just great, because, you know, we just get to see so many different musicians, and some people are better at certain types of repertoire, and some people have such an amazing natural charisma. And in this year, in the last 12 months, we've seen a lot more women conductors, I think. So it's great. I really like that. You know, obviously we have our kind of stable of conductors, if you like, but there are so many other people that dot in and out, and for me, that I find that much more interesting than, say, it just being 3 people the whole time.
How do you judge whether they are good enough? What is this inner judgment of an orchestra? By what? By gestures, by things they say, by the way they behave? What makes a good conductor if you don't know them? How do you decide?
Yeah, it can be, you can know very soon if you like someone. I think it's different for everybody, but there's an element of, I mean, all conductors in a way have charisma. That is how they're able to stand there on stage and convince, perhaps, if you like, 80 people that what they think about music is the way we should all play. And it's only a certain type of person that can really do that, because of course, you know, you've got 80 people going, well, I don't like to play Mahler 5 like that, you know, but you have to bring that to the table. You have to convince these musicians that this is what you want to present, and it's right, and it doesn't always work. For me, of course, you know, I want the person to have decent sort of technique that I can but also it's just, you know, sometimes some people have a real natural authority that they don't, it's not that they're shouting or saying like shush, but they just have this presence that makes you want to listen to them. And of course you have to respect their musical ideas. You know, you're not going to like what everybody says, because we all have our own ideal interpretation, or say, you know, I think, oh, he's doing it too fast, or she's doing that too slow. It's a magic sort of mix sometimes of, and with some people, maybe they come to the orchestra for the first time, maybe not with the right kind of repertoire for them, and they don't, maybe, you know, they get, you know, they're not so comfortable, or, you know, because then I guess an orchestra is a kind of like an animal. It's, you know, and if you don't kind of get into the swing of things within a very short time, you lose people's interest very quickly. So it takes a certain type of person to be able to come in and hold people's interest, really, because musicians always think they probably know better, I guess. But I can't. I think I would like to think all the conductors that have ever come in have had a good time or enjoyed themselves, because I think we're pretty friendly anyway. So
how difficult it is to follow the routine, let's say the rehearsal schedule, the touring schedule, and the contrary, sort of another side. How good is this side that we imagine, that you have a glamour, hotels, fans, and so on, other countries? So what is the combination of routine and glamorous in an orchestral musician's life?
That's so funny. Yeah, a lot of people see it as being very glamorous. I have to say, of course, I would not have had the opportunity to travel to so many places, for example, as I have, if I hadn't been in an orchestra. I've seen places I would just never have had the chance to go to, and that is, for me, incredible, you know, an incredible blessing. It is, obviously, I'm having to cast my mind back now. If we're working at full strength, it's tough. It's not, I would even say it's not a job. I always, if people ask me about what it's like to be in the orchestra, I say it's a lifestyle. It really isn't a job because the hours are inconsistent. You know, we could work maybe just in the morning some days, which is nice, or, you know, we can work from 10 in the morning till 10 in the evening. And it can be hard. It can be hard for people with a family. And obviously there's a lot of touring, a lot of travel. To be honest, a European trip is probably more tiring than a long haul trip because usually with long haul trips to say China or it's you have more time factored in for the fact that you're going to be knackered, whereas in Europe it's just like, you know, next place, next place, next place. You don't have a day free. So it can be quite tiring, but on the other hand it's also incredibly varied. There's never a week that's the same, so it's really having to kind of pace yourself, I think, with making sure that you just, you know, you're able to just cope with this pace of life. I was so tired that I remember the first 3 months I started working because I just sort of did everything, and I thought, God, you know, sort of between all the concerts there's always commercial recordings and things and the traveling, but it's great. I mean I think it's great, but it's not all there's of course there's glamorous sides to it. There are amazing things that can happen, or, you know, you get maybe sometimes you get a free day and you can go off and see something amazing, and, you know, sometimes there are really nice hotels and sometimes they're pretty awful. So it's kind of a mix. You have to take, with any job, I think you have to take the good with the bad, but it's certainly, you could not say any week, 2 weeks would ever be the same. That's sure.
In the last 2 years, I've been really enjoying your tweets and small videos capturing the life of an orchestra. So my question is, how do you choose which moments to capture?
Oh, you mean when I take maybe rehearsal pictures and
yes, and maybe some soloists in conversation with the conductor. How do you sort of look out for these moments, and which one do you think are worthy of capturing?
Yeah, because I think in the last few years, I'm very I'm not a fan of, say, reality TV. It doesn't interest me at all, and but I'm very aware that we live in an age where people are interested in finding out what goes on behind the scenes. So it's not enough anymore for it to be the curtain is drawn back and suddenly there's an orchestra on stage. People want to know what the process is and what the people are like. So I found that quite a lot of musicians are quite into that. A lot of conductors, a lot of soloists, and usually it's quite obvious who will be up for, you know, having a picture taken, or I try and take a sort of, you know, some kind of something interesting that just snaps a little bit of interest to people who are, you know, who say, like, you know, I remember one tweet was somebody years ago said, oh, it's so strange to see the orchestra in their normal clothes, you know, because I took probably one of my first rehearsal shots, and obviously half the orchestra, more than half the orchestra is just in jeans. And we thought, what did you think? We were sitting here in our full evening dress all the time. It just sort of, I mean, some people sort of don't like breaking the mystique of things, but I think there's no harm in showing a little bit of the human side, especially because classical music has always had a bit of this idea that it's an upper class, not for me kind of thing. Whereas, you know, if you actually get to know the people who play, you sort of realize that they are just like normal people who, you know, who are not sitting at home, I don't know, reading Shakespeare sonnets and things, you know, normal people. And this is kind of what I used, how I use social media very much for that, because I want people to say, not think, well, classical music is not for me. I'm not interested to go to that concert because it's going to be something inaccessible and I won't understand it. So that was just a way of just sort of capturing little, hopefully little moments of humor, and like, you know, because when I was growing up, you'd look at, I don't know, my great heroes, and you would just think they were gods, and you couldn't imagine that they had normal lives. And I just think it sort of showing that these people are quite normal. I mean, I was a huge fan of Anne-Sophie Mutter, still am, growing up as a child, and just seeing on stage, and you know, you just imagine this person has this completely different kind of life, or that you would never speak to them, and actually you realize, you know, when you do actually talk to the person, that they're quite normal. And probably one of the best things I ever did was, I was quite nervous, and I asked her if I could take her. I was more nervous than asking anybody else, and I've asked some really famous, but to, you know, to ask her to have a picture taken with her, because she'd been my hero for such a long time. You know, and I just think, well, you know, you usually see her in an amazing sort of, her dresses and stuff, and capturing her in a sort of, I don't know, Hello Kitty t-shirt and some jeans in a rehearsal kind of just shows that, yeah, she's actually got a normal person. So I think social media in that way has its uses for capturing that kind of thing.
But you mentioned, yes, there's this normality to making music, but there is also this grandeur of big occasions like the Olympic ceremony, or John Williams music concert, or I don't know, maybe an opera. Can you describe what do you feel on these occasions when you feel that an orchestra represents something which is, you know, socially, publicly important, even kind of bigger than music itself?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that. For example, like in the Olympics, of course, you know, you realize that, you know, billions of people are going to watch this, and what you're contributing a very small part to something which is big, much bigger than the orchestra. And you know, you only have to say, oh, you know, we performed at the Olympics, and people are like, wow, you know, you're not going to get somebody who has not heard of the Olympics. And I think it's, I don't know, these sort of huge occasions obviously make us very quite geeky about it, because I certainly remember going on stage, and I mean, smartphones weren't really such, you know, certainly weren't as great as they are now, but we all sort of had them and said, well, you know, we've got to look professional when you go onto the sort of stage that we were on, like no taking photos and all this stuff. The moment we got out there, and you just saw the vast amount, everyone was just like, oh my God, photos, and just, it was quite surreal. It's almost like an out of body experience. I mean, I don't know what it must be like for, you know, rock star to go out onto Wembley Stadium or something, but that was pretty much as close to it as you can get. And even doing, you know, huge concerts, for example, at the Albert Hall, with, you know, one of the things I remember doing, which I loved so much, was we accompanied Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Well, they're not the Four Seasons now, his original band, but four singers and his band, and they had symphonic arrangements, and that the atmosphere was very different, and unlike anything we would get in a classical concert. So I do, it is wonderful to have these occasional projects, because it sort of takes you into a different world of, and that I suppose is the sort of more glamorous side to what we do, or working with John Williams. And sometimes, you know, we used to get cast and crew tickets for things like the Star Wars films and stuff like that. And that, yeah, there are those really nice sides to it. So when those come up, I'm quite geek and quite into it. So
Well, can I ask, how can you imagine the world, well, I say London music world, reappearing after it possibly begins to function?
You mean after this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. And I mean, I think certainly, you know, for everybody in London, in an orchestra or musicians, we're just looking at the way the rest of the world is kind of dealing with it. I was very happy to see, you know, concerts in Seoul going ahead pretty much as normal. So it's a really, really tough time because everyone is having to sort of go digital, find some way of bringing some kind of live performance. And it may be a while before we're back to, you know, full strength of playing huge concerts and things. You know, we can only be governed by obviously what happens with this, you know, virus, and what kind of government set down as to say travel, and also the whole social distancing, because, you know, as you can imagine, I sort of, as I watch the live streams of the orchestra, and you know, there's, you know, huge orchestra on stage with a choir or something, and I just think, wow, I can't imagine being surrounded by so many people right now, because obviously I've spent all this time on my own, and it seems like a lifetime ago. But it will, you know, it will invariably come back. It's just having to perhaps tweak things for the time being until, you know, and if that means people, you know, end up playing a lot more chamber music together, or, you know, they want to broadcast concerts themselves, or, you know, orchestras coming back. You know, I saw Hong Kong Phil did some small projects and things. So it's just, I guess, a kind of trial and error for now. But I think, you know, we all want our, you know, jobs and concerts to just restart and be able to play all the kind of music that we love. It is difficult because, you know, much as I will play my violin most days, for me it's not the same as, you know, playing orchestra. It's very poor comparison to feeling the might of an orchestra around you, and that's what I really miss, to the point that, you know, sometimes some of the broadcasts I watch, and I get quite choked up because I just think, oh God, when am I going to play this again? And how, you know, and just the sheer feeling that, I know, I mean, I've never taken my job for granted. I've always felt very, very lucky and really appreciated it. But, you know, had I known that this was going to be an ongoing situation for some time, gosh, I would have really have just tried to bottle that kind of feeling inside, to, you know. But I have, you know, I think we all have hope that things will return, you know, given some time.
There is a question for you from the audience. What violin do you play?
I have in the orchestra I will play a baldantoni instrument. I'm very lucky, I have a tononi as well, but I actually hear myself much better on the baldantoni within the orchestra. But if I do anything remotely solo, you know, Mendelssohn's octet, anything like that with colleagues, I will play on the tononi because I prefer the qualities of the sound. But for some reason in the section, I don't hear myself very well under the ear, and that is so important to obviously be able to, you know, really get what you're playing. So I tend to play mostly on the baldantoni in the orchestra. So I'm very, very lucky to have two very nice instruments.
Well, we have 1 minute, 30 seconds, maybe a brief one. Are you prepared to play to reduced audiences with this, maybe a distanced placing, like to have full halls?
What do you mean, to play?
Well, the quarantine, if Barbican has a reduced seating, would you be prepared to play for such audience?
Oh, I think you know, if the Barbican, obviously it's beyond our control whether the Barbican Centre opens or not, but, you know, obviously if it opens and we are able to have people come in, I think that, you know, that will just be, you know, anything, any kind of music making that can be done, whether, you know, whether it's for less people at the time is just going to have to happen. So, but for certainly in the LSO and the other orchestras that use the Barbican, for us, we're very much bound by whether they Yeah.
Well, in 20 seconds, I want to say goodbye from St. Petersburg. Looking forward
Oh,
to come back. And
lovely to talk to you.
thank you so much. Greetings to London, and hope to see you after one of the
Yeah,
performances.
I know. Nice. I hope to see you again after a concert too.
I'll save the talk.